Good evening. Adequate notice of this meeting, as required by the Open Public Meetings Act, was provided through the posting, mailing, and filing of the annual notice of regularly scheduled meetings of the Town Council on December 13th, 2018. The notice was, on that date, posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, mailed to the Westfield Leader and the Star Ledger, and filed with the clerk of the Town of Westfield. Mrs. Rowley, may I have a roll call?
Mayor Brindle?
Here.
Councilmembers Habagood?
Here.
Arena? Dardia? Nealon? LaGrippo?
Here.
Contract?
Here.
Stokes? Mackey?
Here.
Please rise for the invocation, which will be given by Councilman Hapgood, and remain standing for the salute.
Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for the season of bounty, for the glories of harvest and the excitement of new beginnings that autumn promises. We are reminded that we are stewards of this community, representing its best interests above our own. Keep us mindful that without your guidance, our efforts are in vain. Prod us to right action. Do not allow us the false security of complacency, nor the arrogance of self-satisfaction. Be present in our deliberations and grant us the patience and wisdom to listen to each other. Grant us the vision necessary to carry out your work for the citizens of Westfield. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and we are going to have a couple presentations tonight, which I think are going to be very exciting. But first, Jim's going to make some remarks, and I'll make some remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. A couple of updates on a few things. So road paving, still have the one road left. All the drainage work has been completed on North Wickham. Weather has not been cooperative the past day or two work days, but we do expect weather permitting. Chris, I think Thursday, Friday this week. That's what's okay on North Wickham. So that'll be complete the roads list we approved for this year. Once they finish that job, we're going to be moving over to Mindawaskin Park to hopefully begin the pathway projects as long as the weather will cooperate with us. Also, Chris McAloon, our engineer, has already started meeting with the utility companies for next year's paving, working out, getting their plans of what they're proposing, what they're doing, and obviously what will save us from having to do. Now we have our rules in place where they have to pave the full road if they do cut into the road more than 50 feet. So we're already planning for next year, and that will tie in nicely later tonight with Dan, who is here from IMS, making the presentation about road assessment. Lot number 7, sidewalk. So that project continues. Basically, half of the sidewalk's been done, meaning one stretch of it along North Avenue, along Lot 7. The second half requires a road closure or partial road closure on North Avenue of one lane. We expect that'll be done at night later this week. So we're just waiting for the weather to break so they can do it overnight and pour that sidewalk section. But that's coming along well. Flashing beacons. Last meeting we were here, we had some footings poured. If you haven't seen them, all 3 flashing beacons are installed at the locations of West Broad and Paulstead, South Avenue, Kakiola, and in front of Keller Stadium at Rahway Avenue. So all functioning well, and I think a nice asset and addition to those areas. Leaf collection. Leaf collection started last week. The first pass, people are still getting the leaves out. It usually goes a little faster. As of right now, we're about halfway through both sides of town, north and south. And last Thursday, Friday, we collected around the school areas. We kind of deviated from our path because schools were closed. And so we're also going to try to get the crews to work at least 2 Saturdays this year to go to areas, school areas or commuter parking areas where they can't get to during the normal work week and get those leaves on a Saturday. So we'll post that on our website as well. And again, a reminder, if you haven't downloaded our Westfield Connect app, please do that. We're using that this year to not only push out road improvement schedules, but also now leaf collection. And people can get, find out where the crews are so they can move their cars and know how to prepare for that. So, talking about C-Click Fix, our Westfield Connect app, believe it or not, it's been just over 6 months that we launched the C-Click Fix, which is, I'm going to refer to it, Westfield Connect, powered by C-Click Fix. So just a couple of quick stats for everybody. This is a very quick update. We'll have more details as time goes on, but after 6 months, we've learned some things and we've got some data. So in the 6 months since May 7th through today, just over 6 months, 132 work days in that time frame. We averaged about basically 4 requests a day. So we had 527 requests in that 6-month time frame. 84% of our requests were on 2 categories, trees and roads, as you would expect. Most of them on the roads. And I want to commend the supervisors in the Public Works and the Public Works Director. They've all embraced this after the 6 months, during the 6-month period. Specifically, Robbie Kosiolik and Gene Watkins for roads and trees. Not only have they embraced it, they've really been engaged with the residents, not only as they do in person, but now on this system. So when you submit a request, you get an automatic response that the request has been received, but then the supervisors and Mr. O'Neill will go on and make further acknowledgments, as well as getting back to people that the item has been closed out. So just for some quick details, 527 requests in that 6-month period. Our average acknowledgement time frame is 1.6 days, and that's a little bit less than what C-Click Fix requires or suggests as a best practice of 2 days or less. So we're right in that category right now, which is great. And the average time to close out requests is right now 6.3 days, which again, anything under 10 days they think is very good. So we're still in our first 6 months, and some of the requests we've been getting, we've been learning. We created categories and subcategories based upon information we heard from the public as well as our public works supervisors, giving us their most frequently requests. So we have, again, a lot of requests in the road category, in the tree category, traffic signals, parks. But, good news, there's been 0 requests for graffiti. So that's a positive thing for the town. But so we were looking at maybe changing some categories, adding some categories. People have been responding on the roads category for items that aren't necessarily roads. They wanted to get the request in. So over the next number of months, I want to reach out to the Technical Advisory Council, get their input, because I know members of that council have used the program as well, and get their input, look to add new categories, look to tweak some automatic responses and craft some new automatic responses, and also some working on some of the branding with them as well. So again, a lot more to come, but after 6 months, I think the Public Works Department has embraced it, and I think we've gotten some very good feedback from residents that have used it. They seem to really like it, so more to come, but I think that's a very positive thing. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. So I just have a few comments before we get to the information that we'll be sharing tonight. So I first want to start off by congratulating our new council members-elect, Jim Boyes, Mark Parmalee, and Scott Katz, who I think might be here, and of course incumbent Mark LaGrippo, looking forward to the next few years with a new council. While the election is behind us, the hard work for all of us has just begun. And I do want to remind the public that the next 2 years will be significant as we begin implementing recommendations from the master plan, which is actually scheduled to be adopted at the December 2nd planning board meeting, and the park strategic plan, which recommendations should be public by late this year, early next year. So more than ever, we're going to need input from the public, and it's really important that everybody stays engaged to help informing the decision making. So it's going to be a very exciting and what I think transformative year next year. An update on New Jersey Transit. I attended a quarterly update meeting today in Newark with New Jersey Transit, along with the Raritan Valley Line Rail Coalition, and I was representing the Mayor's Alliance. There is some positive news to report, and mainly that they will be adding some same platform transfers to 3 inbound trains in the morning. I know a lot of people have told me, in absence of a one-seat ride in peak, can you just give us same platform? And they are adding 3 in the morning on the inbound. They're also very optimistic about the prospects. We've been pushing for some proposed legislation. Many people had signed petitions for us to actually mandate a feasibility study for New Jersey Transit to conduct what the implications and how they would implement a peak one-seat ride for the Raritan Valley Line. And the good news is the meeting today with New Jersey Transit executives, they all acknowledge that they are getting pressure from all sides, and they're confident, and I should say confident, pretty confident that the legislation is going to pass, and they're all working on it, and we hope that they're going to be implementing this feasibility study, which I got the impression would take about 6 months, and then we can really know what it is we're talking about in the art of the possible. So, so it was a proof in action that pressure from people works, and it requires to be incredibly adamant as an advocate. And it really is not about ever letting up. So we're going to keep the pressure going now that we've had 2 weeks to enjoy off-peak one-seat rides. On the Rialto Theater, I did last week. I had the pleasure of touring the newly reopened Cranford Theater. It just opened last week with owners Jesse and Doreen Sage. They also own the Rialto, as many of you know. And they wanted to give me a personal tour to really kind of show their commitment to these local community theaters and also some ideas and possibilities for the Rialto. So we discussed short-term possibilities and long-term possibilities, and all of it is currently being reviewed. And they're also going to facilitate an introduction to the investors in the Bellevue Theater in Montclair, so we can get a really good sense of what has happened or is happening there. So more to come, but we're just really lucky that they are very committed to Westfield and the reopening of the theater. What was interesting, and I think was when we met with Jesse about 2 weeks ago, he had gone to the Rialto at 6 a.m. He flies in and out of the state, and he got there while all the pictures from the Rialto Rising contest were still on the walls, and he hadn't seen it. And he came to our meeting visibly moved by what he had just read, and really, although he knew, I think, how important this theater was, I think seeing what people had done really struck a chord with him. So we're trying to, continue that moment that he had and remind him. And he's really, really committed to seeing what we can do in the short term and mean term. So that was a brilliant way to get people to get to that Addams Family screening, Dawn. So it will reap multiple benefits, I hope. So stay tuned. They're going to get back to us with more information, but hopefully, I'm very encouraged, at least by the nature of the conversations. On a completely separate note, I did just want to take the opportunity to follow up on an issue that was brought to the public and the town council a few months ago concerning allegations of overtime fraud at the DPW. I know I'd said publicly at the time the matter was being investigated by an employment law firm earlier this year, which found no evidence of fraud. But since then, it was also then referred to the Union County Prosecutor's Office by someone claiming to have additional information. And so the prosecutor's office also conducted a subsequent investigation, and the town offered its full cooperation, and it was very extensive. But I'm pleased to report that the prosecutor's office recently advised that after a full review of all the facts and the circumstances surrounding these allegations, they found no evidence to warrant any criminal charges or further pursuit of this matter, and they have closed their investigation. While they did make some helpful suggestions regarding ways to improve some of our administrative processes, ultimately these findings that they came with no wrongdoing reinforced those of the previous independent investigation, and the town now considers this issue fully investigated and closed. So I just wanted to close the loop on that was come up several months ago. And on good news, I'm very excited tonight. We're doing some great things. Most importantly, there's an ordinance on tonight's agenda for us to vote on. It's the designation of 1737 Nevada Street as a historic landmark. It has already been reviewed and approved by the Planning Board and the Historic Preservation Commission. I reached out to the couple myself, just thanking them for this really amazing gift to the town. It really marks the fourth such designation during my administration. I think we've done more designations in the last 2 years than we've done in the last 15. So it follows the Newell Home designation on Clark Street, as well as the Reeve House in Triangle Park. So I'm hoping that these designations will start having kind of a positive reinforcement effect, and more people will raise their hand to designate their properties. And it really is the timing is very, I think, appropriate as we look towards the master plan reexamination. And I think we, specifically this administration, remains committed to prioritizing historic preservation, knowing it's important to maintaining the character of our home and of our community and the uniqueness of it. So hopefully there'll be more good news on that front, and as we continue to look at potentially strengthening our historic preservation ordinances as well. So tonight, on the exciting front, we'll be hearing two presentations I think are of great interest. The first will be by WSP. They are the traffic engineering firm that conducted our bicycle and pedestrian plan for the entire town. As a reminder, this was an incredible grant we got from the New Jersey Department of Transportation. And we initiated this effort to develop a plan to make bicycling and walking more comfortable, accessible, and safer for residents and visitors alike, also with the hopes of reducing traffic in town. WSP will present a summary presentation of the report that includes feedback from 2 community workshops and online input. And we expect the findings of this plan to be incorporated into the circulation and transportation components of the master plan, and we hope to begin introducing some of these recommendations you'll see tonight next year. So some of us have seen it. It's very exciting. The second presentation is going to be made by Infrastructure Management Services, IMS. They were retained earlier this year to perform an assessment of our road system and provide recommendations for future road paving programs. I don't know if you remember, we talked about this truck that drove all through town with this infrared equipment to really use technology to assess roadway conditions. So following a year of what we just completed, a record-breaking road paving, we now can leverage this independent third-party assessment as a long-term and transparent point of guidance as we move forward. And they're going to talk about what that process was and what we can expect to see as a community when this goes live up in the next few weeks. So, and lastly, it is hard to believe that the year is almost coming to a close. So I am already entrenched in 2020 planning and anticipating to be a very transformative and pivotal year for Westfield, and one where we need your help. In particular, we are about to open up the volunteer application process. I think it's going to be Friday, maybe soon, Monday. On Monday, we're going to open up the volunteer application process, and this is what we're looking for: people to serve on boards, commissions, committees, and in particular, a very important one this year is Westfield 300. There are going to be events all year long. There's going to be all kinds of things, from one-day things to long-term things, and we're desperately going to need people to help do it. So we are going to have our open call for volunteers. We have received a tremendous response historically, and hope so this year. And there's going to be more volunteers needed than ever. So thanks for everybody that has volunteered. We hope we can get all of the community involved in some aspect next year. So just look for that on Monday, and I think it's going to close, December 13th? December 13th, so we'll have about 4 weeks. So please consider, we'll make a big noise about it, please consider how you can contribute next year to our ongoing success. So with that, I think we're going to hand it over to, who's next to which one? All right, so we're going to move up this way, right?
Yeah, so the council will go and sit in the audience, and we're going to set up for WSP's presentation. Okay, as the mayor mentioned, WSP had we applied for a grant last year, which was focused on the Central Avenue corridor to look at bicycle and pedestrian safety there. We were very lucky that when we applied, we were one of the last towns to apply, and the state had extra money, I guess, and so we went from the Central Avenue corridor to an entire town study for bike and ped safety. So we're very, very fortunate, and I just want to say John Federico and his company WSP has been great to work with, and I think you're going to see this is a summary presentation tonight, because there's a lot of detail to go through. This presentation and his report ultimately will be posted on our website, and as the mayor mentioned, the council is going to ask that the planning board include this report, their report, as an appendix to the master plan REX report. So it becomes part of our next 10-year planning for lots of things going on, for all the things that John's going to present tonight. So off to you, John. Thanks.
Great. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. All right. Great. All right. Thanks a lot for having me tonight. As Jim said, I'm John Federico with the company WSP. We're a planning and engineering company that was contracted through New Jersey Department of Transportation to run this planning study. So I have about a 15 to 20 minute presentation here. And as Jim mentioned, it's really just an overview snapshot of the report, because there's a lot of material there that we're not going to have time to cover, but wanted to give everyone a flavor of the work. Also, there's going to be some maps here that you may not be able to see, but once it's posted online, you'll be able to see everything in detail. So if there's something you can't see here tonight, don't worry, you'll get a good look at it. So just what I'm going to go through here, an overview of the background of the study, talk about a little bit how we outreach to the community, then go through the recommendations and talk a little bit about implementation. Okay. So as the mayor and Jim mentioned, this was funded through DOT. Our consultant team was WSP, along with, I also want to mention, we had a sub-consultant, Susan Blickstein, who helped us with the community outreach. As Jim mentioned, the scope was expanded. It started with Central Avenue, but we realized that it really made sense to look at the town from a holistic perspective rather than just one corridor. And so DOT was kind enough to expand the study to cover the whole town. We kicked this off about 6 months ago in May. And it really is great timing because it complements the 2019 year of the pedestrian designation, as well as the other planning efforts going on, the master plan reexamination and the parks and strategic planning efforts. So it really gives a chance to integrate these planning efforts. Okay, so the overall purpose of the study and why NJDOT sponsors these kind of studies is that they're focused on trying to increase biking and walking, not just the safety, but also encouraging people to walk and bike more in communities. And how we do that is we take a look at existing conditions, and then we come up with recommendations based on what we see on how we can improve those conditions throughout town. And another goal of these studies is really to get them adopted, to give them some legal backing, which really is helpful with implementation. And when we go back to why is DOT focusing on walking and biking, why are they encouraging these modes of transportation? It comes down to the multitude of benefits that they provide. Of course, health. It's great for people in terms of exercise. It also provides equity and transportation choice for those that either may not want to have to drive or may not have a vehicle. And they're certainly environmentally friendly modes of transportation. And there's an economic benefit from these modes in terms of supporting businesses as well as enhancing livability. It's a lot of people are interested in living in communities where you can walk and bike today. Okay, so in terms of community outreach, it's essential in these kind of studies to engage the public, to get feedback, and to really have people come along with the process so that we're not doing this behind closed doors. So we came up with a few different means of engaging stakeholders and the public. We had a study advisory committee, which was a smaller group consisting of town officials, Union County, DOT, the police, that helped to guide the study and provide feedback. We met with that committee twice over the course of the study. We also had broader outreach to the overall community. We did this through a few mechanisms or vehicles. There was a community survey that was open for a few months this summer. We had over 400 responses, which is a really good response rate, better than we see in many towns, mostly from Westfield residents. And this gives us an insight into how people are traveling today, what their issues are when it comes to walking and biking through town, and where there's opportunities for improvement. In addition to the survey, we also had something which we call a wiki map. It's basically an online mapping tool where people could go online and geographically on maps pinpoint those areas where they have trouble spots or where there's opportunities or routes that they'd like to be able to take. We had hundreds of points, and there's comments associated with those too. So we went through and read all those comments and learned a lot of valuable insights about Westfield. Still think, meeting with people in person is very important, and having those opportunities to interact face-to-face, to meet with members of the public. So we had 2 community meetings. We had one in July in an open house format right in the community room. This is where we just went over existing conditions, and we're looking for input on those trouble spots. Had a second community meeting after we were further into the planning process in September. This is when we had initial feedback, initial recommendations that we presented at that meeting for feedback, and we had comment forms that people could leave some responses. So taking all of that input, taking our own field observations and our own analysis, allowed us to hone in, since it is a big town, on specific corridors, specific intersections with the most needs, and really focus our recommendations in these areas. Okay, now moving on to the recommendations, which is probably the most interesting part. I'm going to provide just a snapshot or a flavor of recommendations in a few different areas as we really, the report, as you'll see, goes into a lot of detail in a lot of different areas. Okay, broke this down, even though it's really integrated into pedestrian, bicycle, and other types of recommendations. So that's the way I'm going to kind of go through these different areas. On the pedestrian side and the walking side, the sidewalk network obviously is a very important component to pedestrian safety and the ability to access destinations. Our first step here was just to assess the existing sidewalk network. You can see in this map we inventoried all of the sidewalks in town. Green showing streets where there's sidewalks on both sides of the road, yellow with one side on the road, and red with no sidewalks. This allows us to see where there's gaps in the sidewalk network. And our overall goal here is trying to create connectivity between major destinations and connect neighborhoods with schools, with parks, businesses, downtown. So based on this inventory and feedback we got from the public, came up with a prioritized sidewalk plan for future sidewalk improvements and filling those gaps in the network. Blue here is showing what we're calling the high priority or short-term links, the most critical links in providing that connectivity. And when we say short-term, we're thinking about a 1 to 3 year time frame. Yellow then is showing the medium or longer-term links. Also important, but a lesser priority in terms of connectivity, and that would be more of a 3 to 5 year time frame. The remainder of the segments would be over time as the town develops the network. And I would mention that there are some streets that are so low traffic, so residential, that maybe sidewalks are not as high of a priority. In addition, as Central Avenue was a major concern going into the study, and it's certainly a major walking route for kids to school. It's a very busy street as well in terms of the traffic. We decided that this was an important corridor to focus in on. And one of our goals here was across the length of Central Avenue, because there's not continuous sidewalk today, was to try to find a way to create continuous sidewalk on at least one side of the street. So this map shows taking into account obstacles like slopes, fire hydrants, trees. We looked at all these constraints and tried to see what was the most feasible way of having a sidewalk along Central Avenue. And so this map shows that route. And along with that sidewalk, it's also important part of this recommendation is to create additional crossing opportunities today so that there's better connectivity across both sides of Central Avenue, as well as what a lot of people brought up is the speeds that people carry into town from the Garden State Parkway really create an unsafe feeling in that part of town and make it very difficult to cross the eastern side of Central Avenue. So the recommendation is to create a gateway treatment, something that helps to calm traffic coming into town and also provide an opportunity to cross. And you can do that through potentially a median island with crosswalks and maybe one of the beacons that Jim had mentioned. Okay, in terms of crossing, so walking along the road is very important. Obviously, being able to cross the road safely is equally or maybe even more so important. So the other half of our kind of framework or network planning was to look at the opportunities for crossings and what could be improved. Now, what we found was that, probably no surprise to many of you, many of the major roads such as Central, Mountain, Broad, North, South act as major barriers between neighborhoods. There's long gaps where you're provided a crosswalk to cross the road as high as a quarter mile or more, and this really creates barriers. So what we looked to do was create more regular spacings, particularly on these major roads. And it's through two different methods. One, what you see in yellow there are existing crossings, but given the speed and the volume of traffic, they may not feel necessarily as safe as they should today. So the yellow dots are where we're recommending enhanced crossings, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. The blue dots on the slide are showing areas where we are recommending new crossings as part of the plan. And this would help to create that every block to 2 block spacing so that people can better access parks and schools and other destinations. Also, a few recommendations where the town may want to look into signalizing intersections given the volume of pedestrians and the volume of traffic. Okay, so in terms of enhanced pedestrian crossings, in addition to just putting a crosswalk down, there are a lot of treatments you can do to help calm traffic and make it easier and safer for people to cross the street. One of them, which the town is doing today and is really good, is just using high visibility crosswalks, the pattern that you see there, which is really dramatically more visible to drivers in terms of the striping pattern. But in addition to that, what you want to do is think about sight lines at intersections, ensuring visibility between people walking and cars. So we call that intersection daylighting, making sure cars aren't parking too close to intersections. You can also do that through curb extensions, whether they're curbed or whether they're temporary treatments. That helps create a space for that daylighting. Okay, and then this is actually an example. So what we did was there was about half dozen intersections that were identified as focus intersections that had the highest safety problems and also the most concerns from the public and what we saw and kind of concurred with in the field. So I'm just going to give you an example of one of those today. The rest of them are in the report. This is South and Central, and this really had the highest feedback from people as being a problem area. Especially there's more and more people walking in this area with new development on the northeast corner. But as you can see in the upper right corner, there's sight lines, there's particular turns where when you're driving or you're walking or crossing the street, it's very difficult to see each other, and it sets up a difficult situation. So the length of the crosswalks, the spacing, the alignment of the crosswalks, and just the sheer volume of vehicle traffic makes this a very intimidating intersection. So we came up with a few different recommendations at this intersection, and many of these could apply to other areas to try to improve conditions. There's only so much to work with because you do have a lot of traffic and you have limited space. But one of the ideas are these skewed, or what we call ergonomic crosswalks. They're wider crosswalks, and what they do is they meet the desire lines with the walking lines of people crossing the street. So on these skewed intersections, people are going to try to cross in a lot of different directions along the street or to the side. Not only do these crosswalks accommodate those movements, but they create a bigger pedestrian space and are more visible to motorists. Part of that is also realigning the crosswalks so that they're closer to the intersection so that you have better visibility for motorists. There's some signal timing issues that we're recommending revisiting the phasing so that pedestrians are crossing Ross Place and they're not conflicting with Central Avenue traffic. And then some of the longer term recommendations would be revisiting the right turn lane on South Avenue, and whether that's necessary wasn't there years ago, but it definitely makes for a longer crossing. And so revisiting that in the context of more people using this intersection on foot is one of our recommendations. Okay, moving over to the bicycle network. Find it useful just to make sure everybody's kind of on the same wavelength in terms of what all these different facilities mean. So I'm just going to go over quickly the nomenclature. You've got a couple different categories. You've got your shared condition, where you have bicyclists actually riding in the roadway with traffic. And that's shared lane markings, or some people call them sharrows, and then also bicycle boulevards. And the idea here is that you would recommend these on streets that are calm enough, where traffic volumes are low enough and speeds are low enough that bicyclists can ride comfortably with traffic. On roads with higher volumes and higher speeds, you want to start to look into separated facilities so that bicyclists have a space where they're comfortable and separated from traffic. And there's a number of ways to do that. You have your standard bicycle lanes, which carve out 5 or 6 feet for bicyclists to ride in. There's also buffered bicycle lanes, protected bicycle lanes, where you can have buffers from traffic. You can add treatments like paint. You can even add vertical elements like bollards to create that separation. So there's all these different levels of treatments, and I think probably the most comfortable are the trails and shared use paths, where people are completely separated from traffic. And there are some of those in town, and there's the East Coast Greenway, which isn't too far away either. But in a built-out community like Westfield, there's not a lot of opportunities to create new paths. So a lot of what we did was look at the on-road network to see how we can accommodate bicycling on the roadway. So this graphic here shows the proposed bicycle network plan. Mostly on-road, as I mentioned. In a town where you have constrained cartways, constrained roadway widths, there's going to be some trade-offs. That cartway or that road space is serving a lot of purposes between biking, parking, vehicular movements. And we took that into account in terms of looking at streets, looking at the parking utilization, at least at a high level, and trying to minimize any impacts to those kinds of trade-offs. And so what you see here are those different facilities I went through. Shown in purple are buffered bike lanes, and we've recommended that for portions of Broad Street and Central Avenue. We've got recommended bike lanes on Summit and Boulevard, acting as a pair to provide access to the downtown and the train station. And then we've got bike lanes on other streets, including Lawrence, Prospect, and Scotch Plains, to try to connect the west side of town across the rail tracks. And then we've got a network of bike boulevards, off-road side paths, and shared lanes combined with traffic calming treatments to try to create connectivity through the rest of the network and connect those bike lanes. Also looked at bike parking, looked at where probably the town could use more bike parking, and made some recommendations for bike parking locations. Along within the report, you'll see different types of recommendations and types of bike parking to consider. Okay, and I think one example I want to talk about tonight when it comes to those considerations of how you get bicycle facilities onto existing streets. I think North Avenue is a really good example of that. The existing section between basically Central and Broad, a little less than a mile, is currently 2 lanes in each direction and doesn't have any bike lanes. There's actually no bike lanes in town right now. So when we're looking at that kind of street, what are the options? There was a previous study released a few months ago by NJTPA, a walkability audit for North Avenue that recommended looking at a road diet on North Avenue, which would basically take those 2 lanes in each direction and convert them to 1 lane in each direction with a center median. And so looking at the traffic volumes and the conditions on North, we agreed overall with that recommendation, but with a slight tweak in the options. What we would recommend doing is investigating, still going with 1 lane in each direction, but having a center median or a center lane that's wide enough to accommodate turn lanes at intersections. And I think that will help a lot in terms of traffic operations and safety at those major intersections, while also providing not only space for pedestrian refuges in the center of the road where there's crossings, but it also, with that extra room, you can do one of 2 things. And we have 2 options here. One would allow you to add on-street parking back onto North Avenue through that downtown area on one side of the road. Second option would allow you to use that space for a bike lane in each direction. And this option would advance that bicycle network plan in terms of providing bike facilities along North. We got feedback from the public on both of these options, and there's definitely some pros and cons to each. But what we ultimately decided to do was carry them both forth in the report as options for further study, and not dismiss any at this point. Okay. I want to also talk about other recommendations. I've talked a lot about engineering and the infrastructure type investments, but of course education, encouragement, enforcement are all very important and go a long way towards improving bicycle and walking safety, and also getting more people to use those modes. So we do have a set of recommendations focused on educational campaigns and what's been used across the state and what could be used in Westfield based on those models and what's worked well. Also different kinds of enforcement programs that can be used to support and encourage support pedestrian safety, and encouragement in terms of getting children and others to adopt these modes and really understand safety benefits, the safety implications. There's also policy. It's important to think about, aside from the programs, the policy implications of there's a lot of things that can be done at a very low cost if they're kind of baked into, if they're written into the code, if their code changes, there's really no cost to them, but they have long-lasting impacts as they apply to development moving forward. So just some examples in the town code, things like widening the minimum sidewalk width so that 2 people can walk side by side, tightening up turn radii so cars make turns at slower speeds, treating new development driveways more as sidewalks rather than roadway driveways. All of these things go a long way towards just enhancing the overall pedestrian environment of a town. Also thinking about bike parking ordinances and possibly incorporating that into new development so that new developments are providing bike parking for their residents or patrons. And then finally, to end on implementation, within the report we do include a table that recommendation by recommendation provides information on time frame, approximate kind of level of effort, and a lead jurisdiction, whether it be the county, the state, or the town has control depending on the roadway. So some of the early action items that we think could help build momentum and support and move this plan forward would be the striping and signage improvements that you can make, whether they be crosswalks or pedestrian signage, or maybe some early action bike items. And then the policy and program recommendations I mentioned. Medium-term items would be some of the infrastructure that could be accomplished through the town's roadway paving program, as well as I think there's a lot of potential with the intersection projects for potential grant-funded projects. DOT, NJDOT, federal and regional grants are available specifically for biking and walking projects. Some of them are related to safe routes to transit, some safe routes to school, others trails and bicycle infrastructure. And having a plan like this goes a long way in terms of when you apply. The selection criteria, having a plan like this adopted will definitely work in the town's favor and giving them a better chance with these grant opportunities. And then finally, there are, I should note, this is a framework plan. This is also a vision plan, so there are some longer-term items that will require further study, but we wanted to include in the plan as a vehicle or a basis for the town to move them forward and keep considering them. So with that, I will, that's my presentation of the plan, and I will open it up for any questions. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And again, so this plan, we would then forward to the planning board to make it part of their appendix to the master plan reexamination report. And as you see, I just want to thank some people in the audience. Jay Goldring's here from the Green Team, but also as a member of our steering committee. Don Salmon, our town planners here. We have police department personnel. Mark Logrippo is on the committee. So this was a lot of not only public input, but the steering committee and professional staff. So it really worked out well. I want to thank John again and his team. John and his team did a really nice job on this, and we were very fortunate, again, to get a town-wide study when we thought we were getting one road. So thank you very much. Okay, so give us a few minutes to set up our next presentation. Okay, that was fast transition. So we have Danny White, not the quarterback from the Dallas Cowboys from the 1980s, but just a quick background again, as the mayor mentioned, IMS was hired earlier this year through a RFP process to have a company come in and do an independent analysis of our roadway system so that we can actually have a little bit independent analysis for a roadmap for the future, no pun intended, about what we're doing and how we're paving roads and what the priorities are. And so this was this presentation today is an overview of some of the information that they found after looking at our roadway. At the end of this presentation, a couple things will be then shared publicly later this week, we assume. So this presentation will appear online. And of course, the big news everybody wants to know is how did my road finish up from a score perspective? Where is it on the list? So that is part of the deliverables here that after tonight's presentation, after the final calculations, Dan will send to the town the Excel spreadsheet, which is, you'll see a snapshot of it, I guess, of some of the details. They really did a very exhaustive analysis of every roadway in town to kind of grade each roadway, rate them from various categories he'll explain, and that'll give us some guidance going forward, choosing new road jobs. And there's also some budgetary numbers in there as well. So after tonight, we'll post this on there, and then later in the week, we expect to post that list so people can look at it, and that's what the town council will use as they go forward to create the next set of paving recommendations for 2020 and beyond. So I'll turn it over to Dan, who traveled in from Chicago last night at 3 a.m. in the morning with the snow. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
All right, thanks, Jim, and thanks, Mayor and Council and citizens for inviting me to talk about the roadway network tonight. So again, my firm is IMS, Infrastructure Management Services, and we are a niche firm. All we do is pavement and asset management. We were the first company to bring automated data collection technology to the U.S. back in the 80s. So I was the project manager, so let's dig into the results. So quick look at the scale of investment of the roadway network. There's about 30,000 constituents. It comes out to, and there's 100 centerline miles, which is, if you go down, look at the center of the road, 100 miles, and then if it's 2-lane road, that'd be 200 lane miles. So that comes out to just under 2 million square yards of pavement, and that puts you right about in line of how much asphalt you should have for a city with this population. And for the most part, this is the largest asset that the city maintains. You know, it could be underground utilities, but your street network is a massive asset. It comes out to just over $100 million worth of asphalt there. And that doesn't even include improvements and right-of-way features like curb and gutter or bridges. So that's just the base, subgrade, and surface. And just a quick early look, high-level overview of the condition. The Pavement Condition Index, PCI, you'll hear me talking about that a little bit. It's a 0 to 100 scale. The network as an average came in at a 66, which puts you in the solid B range, actually. So it doesn't make sense, you know, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. And the backlog number was just under 7%. Those are streets that need full reconstruction or partial reconstruction. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we dig in a little farther. All right, so why do pavement management? Why have a consultant come in to study the network and implement this? So basically, what we like to see here is, while a pavement, this is a deterioration of pavement over time, and as you can tell, over the first 40% of the life of the pavement, it doesn't really deteriorate that rapidly when it's new. So what you want to think about is spend $1 today rather than $8 tomorrow when it needs full reconstruction. So keep the good roads good. That's the point of this. So over time, as you spend $1 earlier when the pavement's in good shape, you slow the deterioration over time of the road. You just reset it a little bit over time. So what you're doing effectively is like when you do an oil change in your car or you patch a leak in your roof. You want to make sure keep up with maintenance rather than flooding your foundation or your engine seizing up. It kind of works the same way for pavements. All right, and just a kind of another higher level overview of the whole process from start to finish. It's a balanced approach. It's not just us coming out and surveying the roads and say, here, fix these roads now. Or it's not just taking into consideration, well, this road's in rough shape, so let's fix this. No, we got to look at objectives. We got to look at level of service, what's expected by the constituents, what's our current funding level, what budget might we need to make improvements, and how are we doing. So using the sophisticated technology and working in consultation with our town staff, we were able to come up with an approach to maintain this asset. Okay, now getting into some of the fun stuff. This is the van that came out and cruised the streets, laser road surface tester. So when we develop these surveys and come out and have these ratings, we follow the industry standard, which is ASTM D6433. Not to bore you, but it's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standard. So with that, we picked up, the width and depth of the cracks, the macro texture of the surface, how bumpy the ride is, rutting, and various forms of cracking. So all these distresses are they have a certain aspect of how the pavement is going to deteriorate and how quickly it will deteriorate. So this van picked up 100% of the network rather than just picking up some samples here and there. There wasn't just a rater out there saying, oh, this road doesn't look great, so I'm going to rate it a 4. It's objective data. Okay, and now let's look at some of the results. So let's start with roads that we put in the very poor to marginal category. 0 to 50 PCI score on the 0 to 100 scale. So basically what you see are a lot of base and structural failures there. So basically that's when water gets down in the base and then the cracks start coming up. You see potholes. There could be load-related distresses from trucks maybe over time. But for the most part, when the PCI is 25 and below, it typically requires some partial or full reconstruction or pretty heavy overlays. And for the most part, we like to see these roads get deferred if possible in some cases. But obviously, you don't want to have roads become a safety concern or an issue. So I always like to say, well, what's the cost of deferring a street that needs full reconstruction for another year or two? Well, it's $0 because it still needs reconstruction. Whereas a street that's maybe in the 25 to 50 range that we can get away with, an overlay, well, the cost of deferring that street to reconstruction in a year or two, well, that's going to be 8-10-fold of the cost. So understanding when a street is critical to find the proper treatment was a part of the process as well. Looking at Fair Street here in the 50 to 60 PCI range. These streets are optimum timing for some thinner overlays. There's some cracking and seams there, so you want to make sure that those get crack sealed so water doesn't seep down to the base. So there's a lot of benefit to selecting these streets. Lower cost. You can kind of keep them in decent shape for 10, 15 years, and you have to do less intensive work with patching. All right, some good streets is where a good majority of the streets fall in the 60 to 70 range. This is probably what the average street would look like throughout town. So there's not many distresses that you can see out there, just some seams. So just crack sealing those again and keeping the streets watertight, as we like to call it, is a good benefit for these streets. And there's other surface treatments that the city or the town could potentially look into in the future, microsurfacing and slurry seals. But So these have a great cost benefit to maintain and, as again, spend $1 today, keep the good roads good. And then very good streets is where it gets pretty easy. They all look pretty nice. There's not many distresses that show up. This one, there's might be some drainage issues on the side in the future. You don't want to see standing water. But for the most part, these just require routine maintenance, and they're in good shape. So, just applying a lightweight treatment keeps these roads good. And excellent streets in the 85 PCI range to 100. These are pretty much brand new roads. They won't require any treatment for the next 5 to 10 years. And as long as they're up to standard from how they were constructed, they'll be in good shape for quite some time. Okay, so let's take a look at bar charts. Everyone likes visuals. So here we have on the x-axis is the PCI from 0 to 100, so poor to excellent. And each street segment, block to block, is one segment, falls into these various categories and bands here. So what we see here is, as I mentioned earlier, nationwide average PCI is 60 to 65. So we do about 40 to 60 pavement condition assessments annually. So we have a lot of experience in understanding how street networks are maintained throughout the country. So as we come in at a 66 PCI score, that puts us above the average. So we're in pretty good shape right now. The next metric of health we like to look at is the backlog. Streets that need reconstruction or partial reconstruction. The target we like to set is 12% or below. And right now we're at 7%. Might be rising a little bit in the future, so that's one point to focus on in our analysis. The reason it's set at 12% is because once your street's backlog of reconstruction starts creeping above that, you'll start chasing your tail with funding. There becomes too many, large capital projects that require funding that will take up way too much of your budget in the long term. Then you start thinking about naughty words like bonding your way out of street maintenance, and that's a no-no. And then the last metric of health is the percentage of streets in the excellent category, the 85 PCI and above, and the town's at 21%, which is excellent. So that shows over the last 10 years there's been some reinvestment into the roadway infrastructure. So right now we're passing in all three marks, so credit to the town staff there.
Dan, does your analysis include everything we did this year?
Correct.
Status?
Correct. Yep, that built that in. All right, so getting into some of the deliverables that are going to be starting to come out, there'll be all kinds of different maps. So right here, there's a PCI map. Green is good, red is poor. So we'll have that published in the report, and the report will have concepts of pavement management, and just to reiterate that network averages were in good shape with a 66, and overall in long-term thinking, that backlog number, keeping that 12% or below, and keeping the PCI above a 63 at a minimum should be the bare minimum for the town going forward. And looking into some behind the scenes with the methodology of how the town will operate its pavement management program. So funding is not zero, nor is it unlimited. I don't think Jim and Chris are going to get a blank check anytime soon to fix all the streets. But basically, we need to find a balance that should fit with the town's objectives. So there's a value on the roadway network: arterials, collectors, and locals. Arterials, those are your main pipelines. That's where businesses are on, lots of traffic. Collectors, those are the routes that kind of connect neighborhoods, or the main routes through neighborhoods. And then your locals are the residential streets that really don't see heavy loading and traffic. So each of those streets, that's important that we understand what the functional classification is, because that will help us determine how the street will deteriorate over time, and we can prioritize it based on different aspects. All right, and then looking into annual budgets, what's been the budget last couple, 5, 10 years? We looked at that. So that helps us plan, okay, well, if that we maintain funding, how are we going to select streets? How will we be able to improve the network? Will we see a decrease? So we want to understand how we're going to meet these key metrics like PCI average and backlog. And with that, pavement deterioration, prevent deterioration in pavement quality. That's the whole point of this. We want to keep coming back, but keep the good roads good. And then ADA compliance, curb and gutter information, inflation costs that wasn't included. Those are certain aspects. This is just focused directly on the pavement surface and subgrade. And one of the most important topics is pavement management is priority based. It's not always worst first. So we're not always going to be selecting the worst streets for selection. That's not best practices, and that's kind of a situation where you can start to begin chasing your tail, and your budgets will have to go up over time. So it's a balanced approach in implementing this program. All right, now looking at some funding estimates. Once we went out there and surveyed, start crunching some numbers, back of the napkin type information here. So this first chart here basically shows, okay, what's the overall value of our street network, the total area, and with that, the total lifespan, ultimate lifespan of a street from new. We would require about just over $2 million per year to maintain that asset in its current state. This next example here, you're getting a little bit closer to what our realistic budget needs are to maintain the asset. Basically, it's just looking at the average PCI score for the network, the typical rehab activity that should be selected for that street, with the cost and the life cycle estimate for that street segment. And it came out to about $1.5 million per year. And lastly, honing in and fine-tuning the analysis a little bit more. We placed each street segment into various maintenance and rehab categories. So there's different overlays and reconstruction or just doing some routine maintenance. So basically, with that, what percentage of network falls into what category. You can estimate the life cycle of that treatment, and it came out to about $1.3 million per year. So with these estimates, just to get us in the ballpark, to make sure the analysis is correct and to maintain the asset as is, the town would require about $1.2 to $2.1 million annually to maintain our current state. And that's before other ADA compliance, repairs, culverts and ditch repair, signage and other infrastructure that go along with your infrastructure management. All right, another fun chart here. So on the x-axis down here, you have funding. So it's represented in thousands. So that's $1 million there, and that's $3 million. So what this shows here on the Y is the PCI score. So right now what we want to see is this regression line will show us, well, what funding level will get us to a PCI, for example, of a 70 in 5 years' time. So that number is about $1.8 million per year. And that will actually bump our PCI score up to a 70. So this is just a quick, easy way to understand what funding level will get us to what level of service. All right, and now looking into some of the fun recommendations that we came up with. So I mentioned earlier, maintaining the PCI at 63. That shouldn't be an issue, but that should be the bare minimum goal for the town. And maintaining backlog below 12%. And with that, the planned budget of $1.8 million per year, that will result in a PCI score of 70 in 5 years' time. And the backlog will jump up to 12%, but it won't go above that. So the optimized / IMS recommended budget would be to control that backlog a little bit more, and that would require a little bit more investment of about $3.5 million annually. But that's in the ideal, optimized world. Another recommendation is to use a full suite of rehab activities, maybe looking at what some of your neighbors are using and get the best benefit of other treatments and applications to extend the life of the pavements. And, a steady, effective rehab and maintenance program on an annual basis, keeping up with the crack sealing, waterproofing the streets, and, trying to utilize this cost-benefit analysis as much as possible. So, and to get, for most agencies, resurveying the roads every 3 to 5 years is all that's typically required. So with that, we can jump into what the report and the publication results will look like. So just a quick overview. This is part of the spreadsheet here. So in that, there'll be the GIS, Geographic Information System number, and then the street name, the from to, what intersection it goes to, information regarding the condition, data, and then what year the IMS recommended that street to be repaired when that's selected. And then there'll also be a summary report of just all streets. Instead of breaking it down segment by segment, it will have the whole length of the street with the average PCI score. So if you want to look at, where Kent Place is, it's a 62 PCI. So just a quick look up to understand the condition of the roadway. And with that, I can leave it open to any questions. Yes.
I have a couple questions. So what do you typically say is the average life of the road? Maybe break it down by, you said, by the main roads, the collector roads, because we get that question a lot, which is how long should paving last in general? And how do you balance, I think you mentioned our backlog was 7%. How do you balance, repairing those roads? What if they're the smaller roads versus, sort of investing in the larger roads that maybe aren't in such worse shape? Like, how did you guys balance those two things? Because again, we here on the front lines, my road hasn't been paved in 50 years. It's got, potholes all over the place. But I'm hearing you say, you don't necessarily do the worst first. So how do you balance these things in your analysis?
Yeah. So starting off with the lifespan of a road, it varies obviously. So if new reconstruction, you should probably see at least 10 years before you have to do a crack seal on that or something, or 5 years or so, or then 20 years before you have to do an overlay probably. So you should, it depends. If you get some harsh winters and lots of salt, that will obviously hurt the life. But it should be about 20 years before you have to start thinking about a little bit more costly work. And how we prioritize how streets are selected, it goes back to that cost of deferral concept. So a street, a thick overlay for Westfield, that was the optimum treatment. There were a lot of streets that fall into that category. The backlog, the streets was pretty low, so some of those streets are selected, were recommended every year. But because of where that fine balance of streets falling from the thick overlay into the reconstruction, a lot of those streets were recommended in the next 5 years. And it's a good roadmap to have, but again, it's a balance, and you don't want to take up too much of your budget on reconstruction, because a lot of those streets will end up being in reconstruction. They'll just go up exponentially. And instead of that nice bar chart where there's a lot pushed to the right, it will start sloping and leaning the other way.
You guys mentioned to this, everybody, about the different treatments. Our standard treatment has been mill and pave. But in some of the budget information you put together, there are many other treatments out there that you can do. Can you name a couple of what we might consider, the town council could consider in the future?
Yeah. So remove and replace, it's kind of like recycling pavement. And then there's also microsurfacing and some slurry seals that can. So slurry seals it's basically you waterproof the pavement. It's only works with like residential and local streets and neighborhoods. It won't work on your main thoroughfares. But what those do, it really helps seal, prevent water from getting down into the base and causing alligator cracks to come up. And identifying, when you're doing your overlays, sometimes a road might need a 2 or 3 inch overlay versus a 1 inch. If your overlay isn't thick enough, it's basically just putting a Band-Aid over an issue, and it's just like throwing money out the window. So applying the treatment at the right time will help you prevent from throwing money away.
So
so I live on a street that was last paved in 1975. It's a small street. Literally, my kids can't ride a bicycle on it without slipping or doing anything. Can't roll, they can't do anything. So to hear to not prioritize smaller streets or smaller priorities, it's kind of hard to listen to, right? Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is putting lipstick on pig. They walked around and they put some tar on a couple cracks. I'm not lying to you that it needs to be mowed in the spring and summer. So how does that stand, though, compared to some bigger streets that need, just that easy coat? This is a street that really is in need of repairs. There's asphalt in parts. Councilman LaGrippo walked through my street, that there's 10, 12 feet that there's no asphalt left. So how does that not come into play in needing to be, paved?
Yeah, no, definitely. And, obviously if it's a, smaller segment cul-de-sac, what we did when we started designing projects, we started stitching together logical segments. So, for instance, if your street needs reconstruction, hopefully we can link that to, a main street that's close by and hit that. So we try to stitch together segments that make sense so your, economies of scale, keeping projects as close together as possible. When a street's in really rough shape, obviously, it needs to be addressed at some point in the near future. And so, again, it's a balance, and I don't make the policy myself, but just from a perspective of maintaining the entire network, there are certain segments that do get pushed off because of deferral.
I'm just curious. You sit here, it hasn't been touched in 44 years. I'm sure a lot of people, if you told your kids to go play outside on the street, you want them to be outside, you want them doing things. They can't even run on the street. Literally, there's no asphalt. That becomes a safety issue as well. Back to the town and saying, I need some help here. I don't know. I'm just asking the questions, and I'm curious to see what your report will say about the street.
What street is there?
Starlight Court. I believe, we've spoken about in the past.
We have, and yes. Okay. I don't know what your PCI score was, but
It'll be up there shortly.
I look forward to seeing it because I know it is, and anyone who wants to look at the street, come on down, come check it out. Because
that's why I asked the question, which is, I think this is, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's about how we balance. And I think your point is, some maintenance done at the right time can save the town a lot of money. But to your point, we can't ignore the smaller streets as well. That's why I was trying to understand how you balance in your recommendations, because it's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah, exactly. And you want it to be equitable as much as possible. And again, this is a roadmap. It's not going to be followed 100%. Our recommendations won't be, but that's what it's for. It's to help the town prioritize as best as they can. And this is a third-party set of data to take off a little bit of the burden of selecting streets and help them focus on some of the bigger issues or the more issues of concern. So.
Pretty much the same material used across the country to pave roads?
What's that?
Same material pretty much used across the
No. Nope. So yeah, it varies by state. It can vary within the state. So practices are different in the Northeast, obviously, in Mid-Atlantic than they are down in Florida and out in California. And some applications, they're not viable in the freeze-thaw climates like we have here. And also, a lot of the materials here. The base of the road, subgrade's not very, very strong. It's marshy and a little bit muddy with bases. So that doesn't help with the lifespan of a roadway over time either. So, it varies, and this analysis is custom to the town. Every agency has different needs based on the roadways.
Yeah. The big thing I've seen over the years is when it paved, there's always seams in the roads. That always seems to be what opens up the roads. Is that just the way the company does it, or is there a specific way they could avoid doing seams? Is it just less expensive?
It depends. I mean, want to avoid seams if possible. But again, sometimes there's constraints where you just can't help it. Sometimes it's just a cycle. You get stuck doing one side of the roadway versus the other. So we try to recommend against that, but sometimes the contractor might require certain aspects to be done.
That improvement to get to the 70 PCI score with the higher budget, is that doing more reconstruction or just a more aggressive maintenance approach?
So yeah, it's more of an aggressive maintenance approach at this point. So with the current funding levels, the optimized, at that $1.8 million per year, what that does, it kicks up a lot of streets to the excellent and very good categories. So over maybe 10 years, 15 years, what you'll see is maybe the backlog, the reconstructs might go up a little bit, but over time, it'll be a much healthier network. So if we go back to the bar chart, which will be published, it's kind of flat right now. What we'd like to see is more of a bell curve that's leaning over towards the right. So the network's healthy right now, it's just a little imbalanced. So obviously, most agencies, you're never going to see a PCI 85. That's very rare. So it's for funding wise, it doesn't make sense to keep all your roads in great shape. It's just because the nature of the asset. So where you really see the network becoming really balanced is probably about 10 years time. All right, thank you.
One of the reasons I asked Dan the question about treatments is important for the public and of course the council. Everyone expects a mill and pave, right? Which we've been doing here for years. They expect new 2 or 1 or 2 or 2 inch and 2.5 inch treatment. There are other treatments out there, and so that's part of what they analyzed here. And some of those are for repaving in a different way. Some are more maintenance related. They may not all be aesthetically pleasing as you would expect a new mill and pave. So that's just something they could throw out there from the public perspective, because we did years ago, we tried microsurfacing on a road. Unfortunately, the contractor that did it didn't perform the microsurfacing properly. But when it's done properly, that's one example of something lower cost than a mill and pave, but seals the road, waterproofs the road, and can extend the life of the road. That gets in the category of keeping good roads good. And that provides extra money to do extra mill and paves on other roads. So there are a lot of different things that are disposable besides our standard mill and pave, but that's the expectation of the public. So just something to consider as we go forward. So again, tonight this presentation will be posted online the next day or two, as well as the report when we get it, and of course the most important list of where your road ranks from a PCI score, and then that'll be stuff we use as we go forward in the process for considering road paving in the next couple of years. So again, Dan, thank you very much for your time and your efforts. Good, thanks.
All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. So, Mrs. Rowley, do we have any advertised hearings?
Yes, Mayor, there are 2 advertised hearings. The first is General Ordinance Number 2150, an ordinance to amend certain provisions of the land use ordinance, Town of Westfield, requiring the submission of a digital copy of applications to the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2150, please come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, Mayor may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed.
And the second one is General Ordinance Number 2151, an ordinance to amend certain provisions of the land use ordinance of the Town of Westfield to allow for projecting signs. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2151, please come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, Mayor may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed. Councilman Mackey, please move for the adoption of ordinances.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2150 on second reading, an ordinance to amend certain provisions of the land use ordinance of the Town of Westfield, requiring the submission of a digital copy of applications to the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman LaGrippo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habegood?
Yes.
Councilman Arena? Councilman Dardia? Councilwoman Nealon? Councilman LaGrippo?
Yes.
Councilman Contract?
Yes.
Councilman Stokes? Councilwoman Mackey?
Yes.
Mayor Brindle?
Yes. This motion is carried.
I would also like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2151 on second reading, an ordinance to amend certain provisions of the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield to allow for projecting signs.
May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Contract. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Arena, Councilman Dardia, Councilwoman Nealon, Councilman LaGrippo.
Yes.
Councilman Contract.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes, Councilwoman Mackey.
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes. This motion is carried. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the Town Council Conference Session, Executive Session, and regular meeting of the October 2019?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Mackey. Second?
Second.
Second by Councilman LaGrippo. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Mrs. Riley, do we have any petitions or communications?
No, Mayor.
Now it's time for open discussion by citizens. Anyone may come up to the microphone and speak to the council on which we have jurisdiction. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 10 minutes. Hearing none, I close this portion of the meeting and move to bills and claims.
I'd like to move bills and claims in the amount of $207,953.01.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman LaGrippo. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Next on the agenda is reports of standing committees. In Finance Policy.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 6 resolutions that I'd like to move as a package. A resolution authorizing the CFO to refund Recreation Department fees, a resolution authorizing the CFO to draw a warrant for dog licenses for October 2019, a resolution authorizing the CFO for refund of a dumpster security payment, a resolution authorizing the CFO to draw a warrant for overpaid taxes in 2019, a resolution authorizing the CFO to cancel sewer fee balances for 2018, and a resolution authorizing the contract collector to cancel interest balance.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Contract. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried.
I'd also like to move for adoption of a resolution authorizing the CFO to make budget transfers.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman LaGrippo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Arena, Councilman Dardia, Councilwoman Nealon, Councilman LaGrippo.
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Stokes, Councilwoman Mackey.
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried. Councilman Mackey, please move for the introduction of General Ordinance Number 2152.
I would like to move General Ordinance Number 2152 on first reading, an ordinance designating 1737 Nevada Street, shown on the town tax maps as Block 5604, Lot 5, as a historic landmark, and modifying the zoning map.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Hapgood. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Arena, Councilman Dardia, Councilwoman Nealon, Councilman LaGrippo.
Yes.
Councilman Contract.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes, Councilwoman Mackey.
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried. Last is the Public Works Committee. Councilman Contract.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move for the adoption of a resolution awarding a contract for the 2020 curbside collection of recyclable material.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman LaGrippo. Any discussion?
I just think it's helpful for the town for residents to understand. So we have a current agreement with Giordano. We went out to bid to see how the market's shifted, and it turned out that the cost of collecting would be more expensive if we shifted to a new contract. So we're going to extend our current contract, which is allowed, for one more year into next year. Unfortunately, no changes to curbside recycling. It'll be similar to this year, but we were able to lock in the same price that we're currently paying. There is a separate effort, which I'm excited by, that the mayor of Berkeley Heights is spearheading to basically aggregate as many towns as possible in Union County to get together and see if we could jointly bid on curbside recycling and use our economies of scale to drive costs down. So there's a meeting coming up in a couple weeks. We'll report back to the town. I think it's a great step forward because these costs are high, and if we can bring them down to provide a much needed service, all for the better.
That's right. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? This motion is carried. Any other department head comments?
I have just two quick updates. So a lot of people have been asking questions about leaf collection. Not surprising, leaf collection just started last week. So I just wanted to share a little bit of information in terms of how the Public Works Committee has been thinking about leaf collection. This is a big topic of conversation in our committee. So the first question we get asked a lot is, why are we not using leaf vacuum trucks like other towns? And I think a picture was posted recently, Scotch Plains using them. Our Director of Public Works has a lot of experience using leaf vacuum trucks in Princeton and firmly believes that they won't work well in Westfield. And let me explain why, and I support him in this. The volume of leaves, we have the third highest volume of leaves in Union County, and the capacity of leaf vacuum trucks is far less than our current method using the claws with the big loading trucks. Pile contamination, and this is not only a reason not to use leaf collection trucks, but it's leaf vacuum trucks, but it's also a request to residents, please honor the rules.
I saw mums in leaf piles today, I have to tell you.
If you put pumpkins, mums, branches, I can tell you I've gotten pictures of people mowing their lawn or landscapers mowing lawns and putting the grass clippings under the leaves in the piles. That contaminates the leaf pile. Not only are you at risk of it not being picked up in our current method, but that would jam and break leaf vacuum trucks. So most importantly, please honor the rules and only put leaves in the street. Leave the other stuff to the side. I can tell you, you can bring your pumpkins to the Conservation Center, put it in our new food waste bin, which was full, I heard, this weekend, which is exciting. People have really responded to it. Sorry, it has nothing to do with leaves, but it's exciting nonetheless. And lastly, wet leaves. Try to blow a pile of wet leaves, and you'll see how unsuccessful you'll be. It's the same issue with vacuum trucks. They can't pick up the wet leaves. They're dense, they're heavy, and they don't move. That's why drains get blocked with leaves. So for all these reasons, that's why we don't use vacuum trucks on resident streets. We do use it downtown where there aren't a lot of trees and there aren't not a lot of leaves, but that's the reason why. So a lot of people wanted to know. I wanted to share it. We are working on ways to improve communication. I think we shared this at the last council meeting, but I think it's worth repeating. If you want to get updates to your inbox every day, use the Westfield Connect app. It will tell you every day where the collection crews are and where they're going. So you have a heads up about it and you can get your leaves in the street. I get them and they're great. And there are other ways to get the leaf collection updates. I want to thank Kim Ford. She spearheaded this last year. The town website, town social media, Twitter, etc. There's a lot of information available now that hasn't been available in the past in terms of understanding where the crews are and where they're going. And then lastly, we did set up a leaf collection commission to evaluate alternative methods to pick up leaves. The recommendation of the commission, which our committee accepted and we're going to move forward with, is to launch a voluntary bagging program next year. We want to encourage more residents to bag. It will keep leaves, we hope, more leaves off the street. It creates lots of flooding issues, parking and safety issues, and there will be some incentives to bag, including free bags, a free bag holder so you don't have to literally have the bag on the ground, it stands up, and some form of public recognition. More details to come out next year, but that's the direction we're headed.
Can you mention one question that we've gotten, speaking of roads, because we did pave so many roads this year, that they're worried about our leaf collection method is going to damage newly paved roads. Can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the roads, when you use a front-end loader on the claws, they obviously do the best they can not to scrape the road, right? But it is machinery on roads. So I think they're as gentle as they possibly can, but I don't think it's deteriorating our roads, although it is machinery on roads, which is unfortunate. So in the perfect world, we'd have no leaves on streets. But in the imperfect world we live in, we do put leaves on the streets, and this is the best way to collect them.
Okay. With that,
sorry, I have one other update.
Oh,
sorry.
wow, you're
so
busy.
Full of updates.
Oh.
Yes, I do think that there's been some chatter about PSE&G and our 69 kV line project, which has been dormant from a public perspective, but not dormant from Councilman Stokes and my perspective, as well as Jim and others. There is an update coming, so you may have read about it on social media. We received an email from PSE&G. We're setting up a meeting in the next week, and they have an update. I imagine this means that they have chosen a route and they're going to share it with us. I have no information to share beyond what I just did, which is they want to share an update with us, and obviously the town will be the first to know what we hear. The meeting hasn't been scheduled, but it will be scheduled in the next week or so, and we'll keep you guys posted. We've been very firm, Councilman Stokes and I, as well as Jim and others, and the mayor, we don't want these lines on our streets. We want them down on the Conrail tracks. That's what we've been pushing for. We've employed federal officials and state officials to help us, as well as coordinated with other towns, and we'll see what happens.
And we are prepared for Plan B if we hear otherwise, so just know
Correct.
that.
Yes.
All right, on that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Councilwoman Mackey, second.
Thank you. Second.
By Council Grippo, all in favor?
Yes.
This motion is carried and meeting is adjourned. Thank you.